was feeling about a half past dead. I just need some place where I can lay my head. Hey, mister, can you tell me where a girl might find a bed? He just grinned and he shook my hand, and no was all he said. Take a load off Fanny, take a load for free. Take a load off Fanny. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And you put the load on me. I picked up my bag and I was looking for a place to hide when I saw Carmen and the devil walking side by side. I said, hey Carmen, come on, let's go downtown. She said, I gotta go, but my friend can stick around. Take a load off Fanny, take a load for free. Take a load off Fanny. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And you put the load on me. Go down, Miss Moses, there's nothing you can say. It's just old Luke and Luke's waiting on Judgment Day. Well, Luke, my friend, what about young Galilee? He said, do me a favor, son, won't you stay and keep family company? Take a load off Fanny, take a load for free. Take a load off Fanny. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And you put the load on me. Crazy just to follow me, and he caught me in the fall. He said, I will fix your rack if you will take a jack, my dog. I said, wait a minute, Chester, you know I'm a peaceful man. He said, that's okay, son, won't you feed him when you can? Take a load off Fanny, take a load for free. Take a load off Fanny. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And you put the load on me. Catch me a cannonball, not to take me under the load. My bag is sinking low, and I do believe that it's about time to get back to Miss Fanny. You know she's the only one who's got me here with her regard for everyone. Take a load off Fanny, take a load for free. Take a load off Fanny. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And you put the load on me. You put the load on me.
I would like to introduce my friend Jessica Flood. Thank you. And Clarence with skills.
All right. Hey, everybody. It's so good to see all of you. Hopefully you picked up a sheet and got yourself a nice cup of coffee back there at the bar. You can sign up for the Collective Weekly or support us financially back at the Support and Connect table. If you are watching online, please use your Google login to chat. You can subscribe to the YouTube channel at youtube.com/wearecollectivechurch. I would appreciate it if you did use your Google login, because it's really boring for me if I'm chatting alone. We have Hurricane Help Crews Monday and Tuesday. Sign up at the bar going through DeLand and St. Augustine. All skill levels are needed, from rakes to chainsaws. We have the Harvest Festival coming up with the Methodist Church. There are orange sheets back at the Support and Connect table. Please fill one out and sign up for a time to volunteer. This is October 22nd from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. We have a new group coming up called Fireside Moonrise, and it's going to be this Saturday at Dan and Susan Vaughn's house. There's going to be a bonfire. We're going to watch the full moon over the lake. There's going to be s'mores and great company. You should check that out. As far as other updates on these events and other things, download the Collective app by searching for Collective Church in the App Store. You can also, again, sign up for the weekly email at the Support and Connect table, or email us anytime at info@wearecollectivechurch.com. Ben?
Thanks, Kenny. I got a little signal. Ding dong. It's me. How many of you like to play bingo? All 4 of us. 5. I do see that hand in back. Raise it all the way up. So we have made friends over the last number of months with a congregational church in Orange City. Many of the folks who used to be a part of that active church, which is no longer active, have become a part of what's going on Collective on Sunday nights. So they have reached out and tried to make that space in Orange City. It's sort of right before the split near Big T Tire. I think it's called Pilgrim Community Church. It also used to be called All Saints. So they reached out to us and said, hey, is there any way Collective could use it because we're not using it? And so we are going to dip a toe in the water. We're going to have a bingo night at that facility down there towards Orange City. We are putting flyers in all of the assisted living facilities, so it's going to be a party. We are going to play bingo for money. We're going to finally do what churches have been doing for thousands of years and play bingo. And if you fancy yourself a bingoer or you know somebody that bingos, we are going to be playing for money. So things just got kind of serious. There will be prizes for the kids. Kids play free, but then they can get cool prize packs if they win. And then we'll figure out what to do with the money. But come play. I think the cards are going to be pretty cheap. What are the breakdowns? Two cards for one. I can't remember. It's on the social media. But that's going to be next Wednesday down towards Orange City. Again, all the info is going to be on the app, the email, social media. So if you have questions, you can find it. And again, if you can't find it, email, call, find one of us. But more importantly, since none of you seem to be that excited about bingo, find the people that are excited about bingo. Tell them. And even if you don't like bingo, half of the proceeds from bingo are going to go to support Collective. And as we head into the holidays, we're going to have lots of events which need funding. So if you want to help in that way, just come lose at bingo and give us your money. That'd be great. I think that's it for me.
Thank you, Ben. So finally, whether you're with us online, log on, or you're here in the flesh, welcome.
We value highly the metaphor of journey.
We're different people from different places and backgrounds.
Representing a multi-generational community, and we travel different paths.
So we agree not to make assumptions about the person across from us,
Next to us.
Or in conversation with us.
We challenge ourselves to be sensitive.
Knowing this community includes a diverse group of people.
From lifelong followers of Jesus
To people who are just now open to the idea that God might exist.
We strive to avoid offense.
Ask good questions.
Articulate and explain our responses.
We don't assume fluency in the Bible.
Spirituality or church language.
Because we believe the message of Jesus is not for Christianity, but for humanity.
So we do everything in the spirit of love and grace.
We do everything in the spirit of love and
in a
grace.
spirit of love and grace.
Everything in the spirit of love
And grace.
So we do everything in the spirit of love and grace.
There we go. So we were supposed to have a proper send-off because Laura, who has done all of the video for Collective for I think 2.5 years now, some phenomenal video, I had to give her a really good reference because she does such great work, but she has taken a job in Chicago. This was going to be her last Sunday. She was going to get to come over from Tampa, debut the new video, and for us to express our appreciation. Hopefully she's tuned in online with the hurricane and her getting sick. She wasn't able to make it. But Laura, thank you from all of us. Let's give her a huge hand and thanks.
Just before our love got lost, you said, I am as constant as the northern star. And I said, constantly in the darkness, where's that at? If you want me, I'll be in the bar, on the back of a carton coaster, in the blue TV screen light. I drew a map of Canada, oh Canada, with your face sketched on it twice. Saw you're in my blood like holy wine. You taste so bitter and so sweet. Oh, I could drink a case of you, darling, and I would still be on my feet. I would still be on my feet. Oh, I'm a lonely painter. I live in a box of paints and I'm frightened by the devil, and I'm drawn to those ones that ain't afraid. I remember that time you told me, you said, love is touching souls. Surely you touch mine, 'cause part of you pours out of me in these lines from time to time. Oh, you're in my blood like holy wine. You taste so bitter and so sweet. Oh, I could drink a case of you, darling, and I would still be on my feet. I would still be on my I met a woman, she had a mouth like yours. She knew your life, she knew your devils and your deeds. And she said, go to him, stay with him if you can, but be prepared to bleed. Oh, blood you are, in my blood you're my holy wine. You're so bitter, bitter and so sweet. Oh, I could drink a case of you, darling, and still I would be on my feet. I would still be on my feet. Ooh, ooh,
To live in the present moment requires a change in our inner posture. Instead of expanding or shoring up this fortress of I, the ego, which culture and often therapy try to help us do, contemplation waits to discover what this I consists of. What is this I that I am trying to shore up and expand? Who is this self I take so seriously? To discover the answer, we have to wait and observe. That's what happens in the early stages of contemplation. We wait in silence. In silence, all our usual patterns assault us. Our patterns of control, addiction, negativity, tension, anger, and fear assert themselves. That's why most people give up rather quickly. When Jesus is led by the Spirit into the wilderness, the first things that show up are wild beasts. Contemplation is not first of all consoling, it's only real. Okay, so now we will sit in meditation. So please gently close your eyes. And sit in any posture or position with which you feel comfortable. We are going to stare sweetly, intently, and penetratingly into the darkness before us. As thoughts come in, ignore them, and sweetly bring your attention back to this focus point about 8 to 10 inches in front of your face. Mentally repeat any name of God with which you feel comfortable. Sorry. Light may sprout forth if it does continue to stare into the middle of the darkness or in the middle of what you see. We will sit like this for 5 minutes. I hope each and every one of you experience the light of God within.
a land that I heard of once in a lullaby. Somewhere over the rainbow, skies are blue, and the dreams that you dare to dream really do come true. One day I'll wish upon a star and wake up where the clouds are far behind me, where troubles melt like lemon drops away above the chimney tops. That's where you'll find me, yes, somewhere over the rainbow, bluebirds fly. If birds fly over the rainbow, why, then oh, why can't I? If happy little bluebirds fly away above the rainbow, why, oh, why can't
Everybody seeks happiness, joyfulness, but from outside, from money, from power, from material, from big car, from big house. The ultimate source of happiness is within ourselves. Love, kindness, not mission, not technology, not money, not power.
We find a deep, deep dissatisfaction in out and out materialism, because we are made for something greater than this. We are meant for the infinite. Share the joy. Are you in?
HHDL and Desmond Tutu. There we go. So, general thoughts, and then how is it true but also more complicated than they make it seem? Because it's an awesome video, but we also all live in the real world. So, yeah. And then how in the world would we practice that? So I'm leaving it kind of open. We're going to have some conversations around the tables. If you're not in the mood to chat, hang solo, do some processing in your head. If you're alone and you want to be in a conversation, find a table. House rules apply, no me monsters. The point is for everyone to have their voice contribute, not for one person to get heard over the others. Let's give it about 5 minutes, kind of work through this stuff and see what we figure out. Go.
There's in a conversation like this, there's too easily a line drawn down between the spirit and the physical. And as you said, the stuff is we need a house. Cars are pretty much essential in most cities, unfortunately. So it is a disaster if a tree falls on your car. But I think what they're pointing out is this is what we can't forget is as long as the car is inspected, as long as the house is inspected, a home, as long as you are fed and nurtured, those things are important. Physical is important here and now, but being mindful that those things in and of themselves are helping our spirit, our mind, our body move forward and live in this world.
We didn't have Wi-Fi, we didn't have peace.
It is complicated because you do need to think about the things.
But to be so grateful.
Pretty sure that it's
I think I've got 16 years and I've got this. Be nice to complain that I don't have that screen. You don't have to forego. Being pacified, always chasing the next thing, being right here, enjoying friends and enjoying, hopefully enjoying the work to some degree. That the work isn't just, hopefully, not just about so you can get the next big cause, but it's because you're doing work that isn't simply important to you, even if it isn't necessarily life-changing or world-changing. It's usually and in a deeper way. That is true. You don't have to say
he's talking about these different objects and different things, things like the next level of this, the idea is that the next biggest thing or the next thing for me is that in its own weird way, there's no celebrating thing that's happened. They remove all that focus and then again, sometimes it's nice not to have but you look at instead of looking at what it is for you, you look at maybe what it is to nurture something else. Enough for them, they say that being house is not it does kind of give you a perspective of like what it is that you're supposed to do. They're in their own way most freeing all chains that I've ever not
helping the president, I'm sure helping the president of what is happening now because they are present in
that's also just that the flesh is actually made it fast. Yeah. Stuck in the
Hopefully that was a good conversation. I don't want to know what you have to say. Just kidding, I do. All right, what do we think? It sounds like from listening in here and having the conversation I had, it sounds like there were some common themes. So what do you guys think? Hit me. Where are we at? Excellent. We figured it out. So let's all go in peace. And no? All right.
So
Stacy.
So, one thing we were talking about a bit is that video was good, but I also think materialism sometimes gets a bad rap too. Like, it's not everything is bad, like to want something, and how some things that could be considered good, like loving your children, that can be this is sounding worse than I
Keep going now, I like it.
If you make anything, like even loving your kids, like you're writing that, changing, like this is what's gonna make me happy. And
right.
then, that is your whole, like, you're throwing all your eggs in that basket. I'm just gonna throw a bunch of metaphors in here, hopefully they work out. But that could be as destructive as like just wanting every iPhone product out there. Like it's not just materialism, but things that seemingly are good could also be not good for you if that's what you're looking to make you happy.
Perfect. Couldn't have summarized the sermon better. Didn't even talk about it. Okay, so yeah, not just the stuff, but sort of the posture towards the stuff. Yeah, Robert.
My father, whenever I see this, my father-in-law's voice comes in my head. One day he said, money doesn't make you happy, but it makes it a whole lot easier.
Okay.
That when you have this feeling of safety and security, where you know if you get sick, you can go to the doctor, where if you know where you can find food, you know that your house and your kids are taken care of, it's much easier to sit and be reflective rather than being in a mode where you have to survive.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think, 48 hours after a hurricane, we're sitting here contemplating the deeper things of life. I don't think probably many people in Haiti are doing this. So yeah, I think certain material advantages do. Sweet surrender.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I'm fine.
That was the most appropriate example of dashing materialism against the terrazzo floor. Could not have come at a better time. Is that glass? Okay. Well, just no worries. Just be careful.
Okay, we'll build you.
Most fatalities occur after the hurricane, not during it.
We didn't need that coffee mug.
The more you.
Yes, coffee mugs are more dangerous than Category 4 hurricanes.
Coffee could, well, I'm not gonna certify that, but I appreciate the opinion for sure. Yeah.
Speaking of which, how fitting is this?
Right.
Things that make us happy. I mean, seriously, we're all pissed off. Power. I got it back in 2 days. She's still out.
Yeah.
It's interesting on practice part because I was thinking about this. Everybody's so concerned about and I was too. I bought like 3 of those 2 or 3 hour those little pocket chargers, and I kept going out to my car and charging them so that then I could watch some Family Feud all night. Before I passed out. But there was a point where I was so bored. It was quiet. I grabbed after we put up all of our piles of crap. I found a twig, one that you can flip around and make funny sounds with. And for about an hour, I was just walking around hitting shit. I was hitting leaves, I was hitting wood, listening to the sounds, and this forced me to go back to being a child. Not being childlike, not throwing temper tantrums or anything like that, but being a childlike and forgetting about all the rest of the crap going on and just walking around and just being childlike again until somebody, and I was totally all in my own little world. And then a couple of clients came up, because I live where I work, so that's fun. And they were like, what the hell are you doing? I'm like, I don't know, I'm just hitting stuff, man. I'm like, what are you doing? Playing on our phone. Well, do something else then. I mean, but this took me to get out of that. Does that make sense?
Yes. It does. Yeah, it does. I really truly wonder how many people like did not think as much about like rationing food and water and more about like how many battery packs they had so they could stay online, because I was shocked by how present everyone was online, including myself. But it was kind of like this is really bad. There's an awful hurricane. We might not survive, but everyone's gonna know about it because we're like checking in and we're like phenomenally connected during a hurricane.
But you know what, Ben? For all that we complain about Facebook being a suspect of people complaining about
Yeah.
it, what a community.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Absolutely, yeah. It turns for sure. It was really, really, and I saw a lot of people express gratitude and hope and thanks for the way people had come to their aid or just made them feel more secure about it. Dave.
Thinking back to what Robert said, I agree and disagree with the ability to love people when we've been provided for, when we have money, we have. And I think for me, I have a job, doesn't pay overly well, but I have a job. But I can't think of a 6-week period that I've ever gone through without considering should I quit my job and go make more money somewhere else. And so I think that lack of contentment is a sense of, because I have so much, I'm constantly not content. Therefore, thinking what can I get somewhere else, rather than thinking how could I love or care for someone else better. It's how can I care for myself better, almost, because I know what it feels like to have money.
Yeah. And that would be, yeah.
And it's not necessarily disagreeing.
I think there's a lot to explore there in terms of like contentment versus comparative, kind of like knowing that you're able to make more because you've seen other people do it. So versus are you really not content? Yeah, totally. So okay, Matt.
I just keep thinking about how it's our stuff that causes us to be more independent by ourselves, and it drives us away from community reliance on others, reliance on source, God, whatever. And it's at that space, that kind of tension, when miraculous happens, when God happens, when we're hurting. And so that's why I guess there's some sort of truth. That was the truth I got on the video.
Yeah. So just that the being in the space of dependence, yeah, versus being totally self-sustaining, kind of. Cool. Any ideas on? Okay, one more, and then any ideas on practice?
So back to the hurricane. So our power went out, as it did probably most of you, and we have a small generator, and it powered the fridge, a light, and the TV. And we have a bunch of like old DVDs. What are those? And so we watched a couple movies, and I got bored of that. And then I went back to my room, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm constantly surrounded by technology. I've always got my phone, or my computer, or a TV, or something in the background. It's always electric. And then the power goes out, and I charge my phone, but the Wi-Fi's dead, so there's nothing really that I can do, and my computer dies, and I get in charge of that. And so I go back to like, I would say 5th grade, when I used to read like crazy. Like a punishment at that point was, Maya, you're not allowed to read anymore. Give me your books. And I read through about half of my bookshelf, and I was so immersed in those books that I didn't even realize how little I actually needed the technology, how unimportant it had been. It doesn't mean you get to have my phone sell it or anything. But when I go back to like just these papers, just covered in ink, it's so much simpler. It's so much easier to just think, wow, we don't really need that much to be human.
That could probably be an entire year of focus on technology, sustainability, humanity, community. Those are all deeply interconnected. Any real quick thoughts on how do we practice this? And I do think, back to what Stacy said at the beginning, I do think there's we tend to sort of jump over what was said in the video that he specifies out and out materialism. And I do think that we're talking about sort of like a spectrum of materialism for sure. But what do you guys think? How do we maybe practice this? Yeah, Baylor.
So we were talking about, like, generally if we're talking about materialism and non-materialism or something like that, like that's fairly dualistic. So it's like maybe looking at that non-dualistically and also non-comparatively.
Okay.
Yeah. Because I think generally when I think of like am I living like non-materialist, like a non-materialist lifestyles? You look at like me in comparison to like other countries or
Right.
something like that. So if you're like, but you know the lifestyle's not the same. So you know why look at it that way? And then like, well, and then Dave said, you know, if there's no comparison, is there such thing as materialism and non, like? But we'll get into that later. I don't know.
Maybe you will, I won't. I don't know the answer to that.
I don't.
So, so at least what I'm going to take away from that is at least some sort of self-reflection. Whether that includes maybe a comparison to others or a comparison to yourself, you know, a year ago, comparison to 5 years ago or a month ago. Mayhill and then Paige.
I'm going to feature Louise.
She won, I heard.
Yeah, so I thought Louise had like a great answer, which was we practice this with food and eating, right? Like it's great to go to a nice restaurant by yourself, but it's better with people, right? And you know, the way that even with a little bit of money, right, you buy some food, right, some alcohol, hopefully.
Yeah.
Right? And then you have a feast with friends and like you have community.
Yeah.
Right? So I think we practice this by eating.
Yeah. And that and the way we do it, the sharing, the inclusion piece is huge. Yeah. Paige.
Then there's always like the thought, and this obviously has much more to it that I haven't thought of, but I read somewhere once it said, like your mother's often gonna tell you like, eat those peas, people in Africa are starving.
Yeah.
And then you start to feel bad. But then there's also that thing that goes along with it, and it sounds so insensitive because it really is, but it's like, well, you're not in Africa, and you can't give someone in Africa your peas. And I've always like found it hard in that line, like, again, like how much do you compare yourself to where it gets to the point where it's unhealthy? You know, some people you'll find give up everything and completely like strip themselves naked. But then, but we have these things. Kids get cell phones in our culture, like that's what's like culturally appropriate, whether it's right or wrong, that's like normal. And without a cell phone, if you don't have a cell phone in certain parts of third world countries, it's no big deal, no one else has one, it's no good anyway.
Right.
But if you don't have one here, all of a sudden you're hindered at school because, you know, it's bring your own technology day and you can't do your project, you know? And so it becomes one of those things that it's like, I think in certain cultures, the needs are so different.
Yeah. Yeah, I wonder if the deeper question there is whether the motivation is guilt versus gratitude. And I think a lot of times what starts with a good intent to like be grateful for what you have because others don't have it becomes guilt. And I think a lot of religion is guilty of that. I think a lot of the Christian tradition is guilty of that. Like, hey, we're going to teach you how to practice gratitude. And by the way, if you don't do it right, then you're just going to be shamed for it. And I think that's a dangerous sort of line when you're not keeping an eye on what the motivation is behind that practice, because it can very, very quickly sort of turn pretty dark. All right, I think, Frank.
When you started talking about that, a line that I remember hearing a number of years ago when I was getting into a community we were building on self-sufficiency, and this is back in the mid-'70s, and the line was, life is in people, not things.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that, and as I'm listening to this conversation, sorry I missed the video, but is that we tend to think of what we have, regardless of what it is, as having some intrinsic value independent of its usefulness in our relationships. And I think part of what makes things materialistic is when we strip the instrumental value away from that thing in building community.
Yeah.
And it's about building community. Now, we're going to build community differently in a technological society than we are in Belize or Haiti or somewhere else.
Right.
But it's about building that human community. And if my technology or my things are going to help me build a better human community, and I can share that, then that's okay. It's when the things get in the way of relationships. And I think that's a part of, that has to be self-reflection about practice.
Yeah.
How do I do my things rule me, or do my things help me build community and build relationships?
Yeah, I love that. I love it. Right back to that, if you've got all the food and booze in the world and no one to share it with, what's the, it doesn't do you a lot of good. Oh, Robert, one more. I still got to give a sermon, so
I know,
we're
but
going to.
when you said how might we practice this, I always have this thought that I heard somewhere of, I appreciate this cup because it does well, but I know it's already broken. And this idea, I was the only child who was in love with my toys up until like 2 years ago. And
2 years ago.
But I acknowledge that guitar is fantastic. It's going to break. And my time with it is fantastic, but I know it's not a relationship. I know it's just an object that we can use to build relationships, but I know it's going to break and I know it's going to fall apart. And there will be that tinge of, oh, my guitar's gone. But there's also that, look at all the great time that we had with it. So I appreciate this object in the time that I have with it because I know it's finite.
Could not have transitioned better. I'm glad I allowed you to speak. Your words were very beneficial to me. Thank you. All right, we have a reader for the text tonight. Yes, Larry. No? Anybody? Someone? Do we have a reader? Are you reading? Wait. Oh, sweet mercy. Bring it.
Unlike Robert, I am still in love with my toys. Don't mess with my Batman shit. All right. 1 John 2:15 through 17. Do not love the world or anything in the world. If anyone loves the world, love for the Father is not in them. For everything in the world, the lust, the flesh, lust of the eyes, and pride of life, comes not from the Father, but from the world. The world and its desires pass away, but whoever does the will of God lives forever.
All right, so that clears everything up. It's not the polar opposite of what we just said at all. Bear with me. This is all, I'm going to tie it up, I promise, but you got to hang with me for a few minutes. A couple years ago, I was diagnosed with ankylosing spondylitis, which is an autoimmune condition, a very specific form of rheumatoid arthritis, and it runs in my family. So when my mom in her 20s, very quickly she began to be affected by it. It fused her spine from her shoulder blades up so she doesn't turn her head at all. She's hunched over and she has had 6 hip replacements. And I haven't had any symptoms until a couple years ago. And in me, it's only shown up in an eye infection once a year, right around this time, which compared to my mom suffering is just sort of annoying, but it can be serious if it's not treated. So last week, by the time I got home after the service, I started getting really blurry vision in my left eye. So I ended up at the eye doctor this week. I mentioned last week, we've been reading through this letter, 1 John. We've been doing a lot of playing around with the original language, with Greek, translation, interpretation, and I said last week I was going to take a minute this week to address what we're doing when we spend time in this language and the words to sort of gain more clarity or to challenge what we read in the text, because a lot of times we read something like this and we're like, that sounds wrong and bad, and I don't think I agree with that. And so a lot of times what we have to do is understand what's going on in the original language, which brings us back to the eye doctor. You are familiar with the eye chart, right? Correct. So when I look at this without my glasses, it's blurry, maybe not that blurry, but it's kind of blurry. And with my glasses, much more clear. These are called corrective lenses. They make things clear. So in English Bibles, a translation from Greek or Hebrew into English, basically we could say these function like corrective lenses. They make what would otherwise be opaque or blurry much more clear. And when you're at the eye doctor and they do the assessment with the alien goggles, right? Better here or here, here or here, here or here. You read it, and sometimes if you're like me, the H looks like an N on the very bottom line. But then they say, right? And then all of a sudden the H becomes an H. So they do like the little switch thing. In some sense, part of what I'm doing when we spend time looking at the original language, part of why it's valuable to do it is to help fine-tune or sort of refine the reading and the meaning of the text for us. And I think when I say this, sometimes I say this to people and they go, well, how can we even trust the English translation at all? If sometimes we read a text and we end up with something so far off, that seems so different than what we read in sort of the basic text, maybe we shouldn't use it at all, right? Maybe we just shouldn't read the Bible in English because we can't make any sense of it. And while I understand the frustration, because I've been doing this for a lot of years now, I think that's kind of like saying, well, if I can't distinguish between the H and the N, it would be better for me to be blind. No. By and large, the text in English gets us very, very close to the meaning. And I think maybe the bigger part of what we're acknowledging is that there is a difference between translation, what these words are as they move from an original language, Greek or Hebrew, into English, and interpretation, what these words mean. There's a significant difference. And I think this is where we are actually ending up with the larger gap between what we read and sort of where we land. I don't think it's translation primarily. I think it's a matter of interpretation. We are approaching the text with a very different interpretive lens, as you might imagine, from many translators over the last number of thousands of years. And it doesn't help that when we read English Bibles, translations span from a literal translation to something called a more readable translation, which tries to do sort of a literal / harmony to make it more readable for English ears, and then all the way to something called a paraphrase, which is not trying to translate it literally at all. It's sort of grasping for big ideas. So if I'm translating something from Greek, and there are 6 choices that I have to make to get a phrase or a passage or a word from Greek to English, what I'm doing is not one-to-one translation. I'm not taking one word in Greek and saying, okay, it corresponds to this one word in English. It becomes a work of interpretation, because if I'm choosing which of the 6 English words best matches what I think it means, that word means is really important in Greek, we're no longer talking about translation. I'm making a decision about what I think a word from Greek means as it moves to English. All of this is very important. Background for tonight's passage, because it opens with this strong assertion: do not love the world, or the love of God is not in you, or the love of the Father is not in you, says. It seems very polarizing. It seems very binary, that these things are at odds. Either you love God or you love the world. But we've been saying all along, this letter, 1 John, is written to and from the community shaped by the Gospel of John, and this poses a problem. And I think the problem is a good one, because it challenges this idea that this is binary, that you can only either love God or love the world. How many of you have ever watched professional or college football in any way, shape, or form? All right, so you've seen the black stuff under the players' eyes? Very often there will be like a name with some numbers after it. A lot of times that's a Bible reference. How many of you have ever seen this under a football player's eye? How does this passage begin from the Gospel of John? God so loved the world. And the passage tonight from the letter, do not love the world. What? So what's the deal? We've got sort of a mismatch here. The Gospel of John, Jesus says, God loves the world. This is actually understood to be sort of the motivating engine of the entire Gospel of John. And the understanding also in the Gospel of John is that we are supposed to achieve oneness with God, some sort of God consciousness, the experience of interconnectedness of all things between people and God and the world and the universe. But then in 1 John, this letter, they're saying, don't love the world. So what's the deal? We could say these are not the same authors, right? Very clearly, the people that wrote the Gospel of John, this is now 30, 40, 50, 60 years later. These are different authors, actually probably been edited a few times as well. So maybe they're using the same word, but they're using the word in a different way. Like, I love chicken wings, and I love my computer, and I love my kids, and I love Stacy, and I love God. These are all different sort of forms or intensities or expressions of love, but they're all the same word. And in the English language, we've talked about this probably ad nauseum, the word love has this elasticity. The word love has this fluidity of use. It gets used for all these things. Interestingly, we find the same thing to be true for the Greek word agape. This definitely is used for the unconditional love of God, but it's also used to describe the appreciation for a good meal. It has this same elasticity. So yeah, this could be sort of a varied use. It's the same word, it's being used in a different way. Part of what I love, the beauty of ambiguity, is that we don't know how John 3:16, nor how the editors of 1 John intended these words to be used. They didn't tell us. They wrote them, we've received them, but they didn't say, this is what I mean specifically when I use this word. We don't have that. And so we have to find now ways to make meaning for ourselves. We have to take educated guesses. We've got to use what we know about the language and how it's used in other places. But essentially, we have to bring it to bear on our world. We have to understand what it means for us. I think what the passage is saying, I think the opening line, is much more like this, and I'll show you how I get there. Be careful how enamored you become with the things of this world, because they can make it tough to experience God. So rather than that very hard and fast, don't love the world or you can't love God. And if we're being even more plain, be careful how attached you become to the conditional, because it can make it tough to experience the unconditional. And I think a lot of you said this in different ways in your comments about materialism. So ultimately, I think this passage is about the problem of attachment, which I think is sort of back to what Stacy said. It's not necessarily always the things, it's about our posture towards the things. And I think Frank and Louise were saying that as well. We begin to see this in the next verse. For everything in the world. So apparently we're already not talking about the world, nature, creation, the cosmos, reality as we know it. We're talking about some specific things in the world. They go on with these beautiful examples: the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, the pride of life. I want to pause because these three phrases present such a perfect opportunity to show you what I mean when I talk about the value of taking some time to look at the language, to talk about the difference between translation and interpretation. The first phrase is the epithumia of the sarkos. So epithumia is actually a neutral desire. This desire can be for good things, it can be for bad things. It's actually a very generic, general kind of desire. It's like the word love. It has this wide range of elasticity. It can be used for a lot of things. It can be, I want some Thai food, and it can be this impassioned lust of, I want you, right? It spans that. It can mean all these things, that kind of breadth of desire. And then the word sarkos translates flesh. Interestingly, in the New Revised Standard Version, this is a very literal translation. This is the translation used by the Academy. This is the text I require for all the students in the religion department in my classes at Stetson. The NRSV translates it desires of the flesh rather than lust of the flesh. But in our reading in the NIV, we get lust of the flesh. And then I love this. I kept looking. There's an updated version of the NIV, today's New International Version, that goes even further. The cravings of sinful people. So we got from a literal translation from the desires of the flesh. This is not a one-to-one translation. The cravings of sinful people. Somewhere along the line, somebody decided that this is a negative sort of desire. We go, how in the world did we get there? What's happening is some translators over time are interpreting this through the lens of Paul, who uses the phrase sarkos to mean sinful people, or the desires of sinful people, that these are bad desires. They sort of made this decision, these are negative things. The problem is, the letter of 1 John, coming from the community of John, the Gospel of John begins with these words, the word became sarkos. The word did not become the cravings of sinful people, right? The translation we use is the word became flesh, the idea that God is somehow mysteriously present in humanity. So this is no longer translation, right? This is interpretation. Somebody's decided to make this choice. And we're gonna side with the letter of 1 John, with the John community, who uses this more neutral understanding, the desires of the flesh. I think we might actually say human desires, the desires of the human body. And are some of these good desires? Are some of these beautiful and life-giving desires? Absolutely. Can some be abused? Can some turn self-destructive? Absolutely. That's the point. These are neutral desires. They're desires. They can be great. They can be horrible. They're desires. So let's say the desires of the body. right? All kinds, good, bad, whatever. And again, the next phrase starts with the same word, epithumia, that same neutral desire, the desires of the eyes, and yet again, we get the translation, the lust of the eyes, from the more neutral desires of the eyes. This is another interpretive decision to read this negatively. In reality, again, did the neutral desires of the eyes include lust of the eyes? Absolutely. Did they also include beautiful desires? To look at paintings, to see sunsets, to appreciate form, to look at architecture, to view a landscape. Yeah, these are all the desires of the eyes, and they're not bad things. They're actually really good things. The point is these are neutral. They're neither good nor bad, and all of these things are in the world. Desires of the body, the desires of the eyes, and the last one is the pride of biou, from the root word bios, the pride of life, which is actually a pretty good translation, but there's a nuance in the Greek language, and this actually has to do with livelihood. This has to do with how a person makes their living. So we might say the last one is not the pride of life, but the pride of livelihood. And by the way, what do you do for a living? And how much do you make? And what neighborhood do you live in? And where do your kids go to school? And what college did you attend? And what kind of car do you drive? Do you understand? This is the pride of bayou, the pride of livelihood. And again, is some of this good? Should we have positive self-esteem about the things we've worked for? Absolutely. Can it also be problematic? Yeah. I think Stacy said this. If this is all that defines you, you're going to be in real trouble when the economy crashes, or when your practice closes, or when the partnership dissolves, or when the market changes. If you've got everything tied up in the pride of your livelihood, you're going to be in trouble because that stuff changes. All of this to say, one translation leaves this open and neutral and says that people have desires, people connect with things in this life, and then another translation makes the choice to read this in a much more dark and sinful and negative and sort of that guilt, shame kind of way. So these are two English renderings, very, very different meanings. And we're going to side with the neutral one, but even if we do, the point of all of this in the letter is be careful how attached you get to these things. Many of them good things, beautiful things, life-giving things. Because again, the issue is not the things. The issue is careful how you get attached to those things. Why? And he says this in the next phrase. Because these things are passing away. And Robert's illustration is perfect. To be able to hold a guitar and know that the guitar is already gone, right? To hold a mug and say the mug is great for what it is, but it's already broken, right? It will pass away. And I love this because he doesn't say the world and these desires, these things are evil. And he has no problem talking about evil elsewhere. That's just simply not what he's saying here. He's saying these things are passing away. They're passing away. And since these are good Jewish mystics, they're steeped in the wisdom tradition, you get the sense that these writers have read the wisdom in the book of Ecclesiastes, where the author says the world is vapor. The world is mist. It's passing. And we see this thread actually run throughout the narrative of the scriptures, in which the tradition over and over and over is trying to help people see that there is a deeper experience of life, a density, a quality, an unconditional nature to life, but it begins with this realization that life is passing away. Here the letter says, the one who does the will of God, but there's even, we said this a few weeks ago, there's a more specific translation of this word does, actually might be the one who practices the will of God. Now, it's important that we say this. This phrase, will of God, this is not the pop culture idea of a predestined, sovereign plan that God has sort of decided in advance and it will be done no matter what. That's an entirely different word from this. This word actually translates closer to desire, the one who practices the desire of God. And what you would notice if we were reading this in the original language is that there's a really clever play on words in this whole passage. Don't be too enamored with the desires of this world, but practice the desire of God. So what is the desire of God? According to this letter, it's aeon zoe. It is eternal life. And so the idea is, if we can practice this, we will live this kind of life. We've been saying all along, the best translation of this phrase is not that we will live forever. That's actually kind of a bad translation, because we're not talking about quantity of time, we're talking about quality of life. And so the idea is we will be experiencing a life deeper than that which is passing away, deeper and more steady than the instability of our passing desires, that somehow we can detach from these attachments and connections to the things that are passing away. The point of all this introduction, actually probably the whole sermon is just this: practice non-attachment. Practice non-attachment, right? That's what this section is about. Be careful how attached you get to the things in this world, how enamored you become. So we could also say surrender the outcomes. We could say let go, talk about releasing expectations. Lots of language. And maybe this sounds very Eastern. It might sound very Zen, and I do think this is one of the gifts that we receive from our kinship with Buddhist practice. This is also present in Hinduism, but fascinated. I was talking to Jim, I think, earlier. I had to sort of leave the Christian tradition to learn about non-attachment, and the more I learned about it, the more I realized this has actually been at the heart of the Christian tradition all along, only we use different language. Instead of attachment, we use the word idolatry. And instead of non-attachment, we would say non-idolatry. Let me explain. In the Hebrew Bible, idolatry is making an invisible God visible, shifting allegiance or fidelity from this invisible, unconditional, universal, and then attaching to a visible, conditional, particular form or expression, and saying that image, saying that idol, the statue, actually corresponds to God, when in fact it doesn't. And we tend to do this now with beliefs. We do this with ideas. We do this with particular forms of religion more so than making statues. We say we've got the right way to do it, and we've got the right reading, and we have the right belief system. Peter Rollins does some really good work on this. He did this when he was here earlier this year. He talks about the philosopher and theologian Paul Tillich, who speaks of this in terms of idolatrous faith versus non-idolatrous faith. And Pete used the example of patriotism, which is fitting, the time in our lives that we find ourselves. If we say my faith, my fidelity, my allegiance is to country, right or wrong, no matter who we bomb, no matter how we conduct ourselves, who we discriminate against with legislation, faith is in country, right or wrong. He says this is an idolatrous faith because it preserves the status quo and it presumes that this particular expression of our country is our country. While a non-idolatrous patriotism, a fidelity to country, would say, my allegiance to country is so deep that if and when my country stands against its own values, its own convictions, like freedom, democracy, liberty, justice, that I will oppose my country on its behalf. Pete coined this beautiful phrase he calls the fidelity of betrayal. I love it. A kind of non-attachment with a deeper allegiance. There is a non-attachment to the current expression, to the current form of country, but a deeper allegiance to the unconditional values beneath it. And we don't have to imagine this, right? All we have to do is turn on the news, because this is happening right now with figures like Colin Kaepernick and sports teams and public figures around the country who are standing against the way things are as a form of fidelity to this nation, protesting against the attachment that so many people have to defending the way things are. This is happening also right now in Western Christianity, thank God. It's about time, because folks are saying we can't remain attached to the status quo and the institution as is at the expense of LGBTQ equality, at the expense of racial equality, of global environmental intervention, of horrific theology guilty of dehumanizing and degrading other religions. We can't go on doing that just because it's what's been done for the last several hundred years. Instead, people, more and more people, are detaching from that so that we can moor ourselves to a deeper anchor, to the values that are actually underneath that. The unconditional values that are harbored and called for in the name of God and in the life of Christ, values like justice and peace and equity, sustainability, hospitality, grace, forgiveness, and love without condition. So back to this passage. When we're warned not to become too enamored with the things of this world, it's not just we have some desires, right, what feels good, sort of pleasure. It's not just we have the desires associated with our eyes, what looks good, pleasure. And it's not just the pride of our livelihood, pleasure and power and status that's associated with wealth and how we make our money. Because keep in mind, these are all still neutral desires. The problem isn't the desire. Because many of these are really, really good desires. The problem is how we attach to them. When we allow these desires to become fixed, when we become too attached to that thing or that feeling or that way or that lifestyle, that we cling, that we can't bear to think of change, that we can't release it, that we can't surrender a particular outcome, we've then lost sight of the life beneath the life. the unconditional beneath all of those conditions, the universal behind each of those particulars. All of which, that expression of life, all those conditions, all the particulars, the author reminds us, these are passing away. Cup's already broken. The guitar's already gone. And when we can't detach, when we can't let go, when we cling to these idols as absolute, when we attach unconditional significance to the conditional, when we ascribe infinite value to the finite, this is the source of so much pain. So much pain when they do inevitably pass away, and they will. They will. These things, these finite things that we attach to, they will pass away. So the authors are saying there is a life, right? They call it eternal life, but there's this kind of life, this depth and quality of life, which can be free. And if we're being honest, probably not totally free, because this is the real world, but we can probably be more free from the suffering that comes from attachment. The authors think this is possible. They say, we've experienced this, we think this is possible for you too. And we've practiced this exercise very recently because we just boarded up houses and we just moved junk out of the front and backyard, or else you chained it to the chain link fence like I did, or threw it in the pool. And we prepped with rations and we hoped for the best for our stuff and for our homes and for our businesses. Absolutely. But what I saw also over and over on social media is that we're also very aware that the stuff in danger of passing away, or in this case, blowing away or washing away or whatever, is far secondary to the lives and the relationships, the presence and the meaning, to Frank's point, that is shared between people gathered around that stuff. And this is a really simple, tangible reminder this weekend. And yes, even the people are passing away, right? And that's tough to wrap our minds around. But I think that's also why we kept hearing the phrase, if you have to evacuate, don't be stupid, evacuate. Hunker down, stay safe, be smart. You're more important than your house, than your business, than your whatever. People are saying human life is the value. And I think there's a reason, I find this so fascinating. There's always a reason that someone has to level a warning, right? And I love this. When I read a rule and I think about the fact that there's a reason the rule exists, that somebody tried it, like whatever the ridiculous behavior is. So right after Hurricane Bertha, I think it was in 1998, a bunch of friends and I went wakeboarding through our neighborhood behind my friend's 4x4 Jeep, and we got pulled over. It's like 6 inches of water with a wakeboard behind a Jeep. And sure enough, on the news that night, no recreational water sports in public roadways. There are reasons people issue warnings. There are reasons these rules get created. So the reason this author has to write this is because things in this life are sticky. Like we said, these desires, these things, they're all really, really good, and they're meant to be. This is actually at the heart of the Christian tradition, that the world is good, that material is good, that the body is good, right? At the end of the creation poem, God says it's good. And in fact, about people, it's very good, right? The fruit of the tree is good. It's pleasing for the eye. It's good for food. The things in this world are sticky because they're good and pleasing and enjoyable and beautiful, and they're meant to be enjoyed, and so it's easy to get stuck because our natural inclination and posture is not Teflon, right? We get stuck to things. It's easy to attach to the finite, to the conditional, to these idols in particulars, because they tend to look good and they tend to make us feel good. And especially when they prop up our sense of power and pleasure and praise and safety, we get stuck because that stuff feels really good. So I think the warning is actually first in admission that the things in the world are really sticky and it's really easy to get stuck. And then I think the invitation is this: practice sort of the catharsis of peeling Velcro. If you love that sound, think about that. Practice unsticking. And remember, we've said this, I think now 2 or 3 weeks in a row, these authors have an extraordinarily high view of their audience. They've said just in the first 2 chapters, they say, we've experienced this kind of unconditional life, and we know that you can too. That this way of life, unstuck, unattached, has empowered Jesus to love people unconditionally, and they say, we've seen that kind of love in you also. They say the light of this unconditional life, this non-attached life, is already shining in you. And they're saying here again, You already have this ability. You have this reality. You have this deeper quality, this non-anxious, peaceful, present density of life and non-attachment already in you, already available to you. Not as a belief, but as a practice. It's not something you can agree with, something you have to practice experiencing. Practice non-attachment. So the hurricane has prompted this, right? Where we run the worst case scenarios in our head. Everybody in the house blows away, we lose everything, the insurance doesn't cover it. As long as we're okay, that's all that matters. If we suffer every little death we can think of, loss of stuff, loss of career, loss of status, loss of pleasure, loss of purpose, on and on and on and on, we can still imagine a life that goes on after that. And I think the world's great spiritual traditions go a step further, and they invite us into a direct confrontation with our own mortality. We talked about this a few weeks ago. Our own mortality and that of the ones we love, because it's not just the cup and the guitar. It's coming to terms with the fact that I'm not going to be here forever, and that the people that I love most are not going to be here forever. I think this is one of the most important reasons for us to practice the Eucharist, this non-attachment, every single week, because this is a meal that puts us face to face with mortality. And I think any other way that we try to spin this in some sort of triumphal or victorious way misses the truest value of what's going on here. Because this illustrates over and over and over the most significant and meaningful form of mortality. A life that is so rooted in the unconditional, in the infinite, so unpersuaded by the idle promises of praise and power and pleasure and safety, so disinterested with the particular expressions of the day, that this life is willing to unstick in the most profound way. We speak of this as self-giving love. To non-attach to the point even of death. So as we practice this sober look at the Eucharist as the promise of mortality, rather than the false promise of never-ending attachment, think about that. How many times have you heard the gospel presented as never-ending attachment? You can have all the stuff and all the people you love forever. Sorry. No, it ends the same way every life ends. Everybody dies. All the stuff goes away. Hear the good news. We might do well, though, to ask ourselves, and maybe not just once a week, maybe not just around this table, but maybe even more regularly. When we see the body broken, this image of body separated from blood, blood shed, we might do well to ask ourselves, as we imagine our death and the things that we might die for, to think also about the things that we might be remembered for. We realize we're asking deeper questions. What is it that we're living for? Is the ultimate goal the accumulation of the things to which we're stuck? Or is there in each of us, and sometimes this gets clouded by our forms of attachment, is there a deeper concern? Is there an infinite ache? Is there some kind of an unconditional call? A universal pull beneath the particulars of our lives that might free us, just a little bit at a time, free us from this attachment, in order to live lives that are a little bit more honest, with a little more integrity, just a little more depth, right here in this life. What can't you imagine living without? This might be on our minds since we've just come through the hurricane. What can't you imagine living without? I don't think, first and foremost, the Eucharist is an invitation to celebrate it that one day you'll get it back in heaven. I think instead the Eucharist is where we come face to face with whatever that thing is that you can't live without. That too is passing away. Non-attachment asks us to practice over and over and over this question: what are we living for? What are we dying for? This table has been set for us tonight. It is open to us and to all people. And no one will ever be turned away. If you'd like, you can feel free to come and grab a piece of bread and dip it in the cup as we reflect together.
When the night has come and the land is dark and the moon is the only light we'll see. No, I won't be afraid. No, I won't be afraid. Just as long as you stand by me. And darling, darling, stand by me. Oh, stand by me. Oh, stand now. Stand by me. Stand by me. And if the sky that we look upon should crumble and fall, or the mountains should tumble to the sea, I won't cry, I won't cry, no, I won't shed a tear, just as long as you stand by me. And darling, darling, stand by me. Oh, stand by me. Oh, stand now. Stand by me. Stand by me. And darling, darling, stand by me. Oh, stand by me. Oh, stand now. Stand by me. Stand by me. Whenever you're in trouble, won't you stand by me? Oh, by me. Oh, stand now. Stand by me. Stand by me.
You can sign up for the weekly or give at the support and connect table by the back door, or back by the door. If you're our guest and you'd like to get to know us a bit better, we'd love to connect in the back near the bar, so come chat. If you want more info on weekly community groups, download the app and check the Facebook, or it says here email, slide, there you go. info@wearecollectivechurch.com. After the benediction, please help us break down the room for the yoga chapel. Thanks for being here with us here and online. Your presence makes us who we are. That you have placed a harmony of lights in the heavens, that night is followed by day, and the glowing of the moon by the glistening of the sun. Thanks be to you, O God. That you have placed a harmony of lights in my soul, that there is gentleness and firmness of strength, intuitive knowing, and enlightened reasoning. thanks be to you. Let me be so sure of your law of harmony in all things that I seek it in my own depths, and in knowing it in my inner life, yearn for it in the torn relationships of my world, man and woman, black and white, sun and moon, in a harmony of movement. Grace and peace.